There is a particular kind of damage that happens slowly, so slowly that you do not notice it is happening until it has already changed something you cannot get back. The kind of damage that does not announce itself with a dramatic injury, a fall, or a single bad moment. The kind that accumulates quietly, over months and years, from things you do every single day, things that feel completely ordinary, that you have been doing for decades without ever questioning, that nobody ever told you were hurting your knees. If you are over 50 and you have been experiencing knee pain, knee stiffness, or that deep aching pressure in the knees that seems to be slowly getting worse, I want to suggest to you today that the source of that damage may not be the arthritis alone, and it may not be bad luck, and it may not simply be the inevitable cost of aging. It may be 3 specific mistakes that adults over 50 make every single day, 3 patterns of movement, posture, and body mechanics that research in biomechanics, orthopedics, and sports medicine has identified as among the most damaging things you can do to the knee joint after 50, and that are entirely correctable once you know what they are. Today I am going to explain exactly what these 3 mistakes are, why they damage the knee joint at the level of cartilage mechanics and joint biomechanics, how to recognize them in your own daily movement, and precisely what to do instead. Not vague advice, not general warnings, specific actionable corrections that you can implement starting today, and that, practiced consistently, could make a meaningful difference to the rate at which your knee joints are loading, wearing, and deteriorating. If you are over 50 and you want to protect your knees from further damage, subscribe to this channel right now before we start. Every week we create evidence-based health content specifically for adults over 50 who want real answers about their bodies. Hit subscribe and make sure you never miss a video that could protect your joints. Let us begin with the understanding that makes these 3 mistakes comprehensible. The knee joint is not simply a hinge. It is a complex load-distributing structure that, at its peak, handles forces of 5 to 8 times your body weight during activities like stair climbing, squatting, and rising from a chair. The articular cartilage that covers the ends of the femur, tibia, and patella must absorb and distribute these forces across its entire surface area, and it does this most effectively when the mechanical alignment of the leg, the timing of the muscles that support the joint, and the movement patterns through which the knee is used are all optimized for even load distribution. When alignment is off, when muscles are weak or poorly timed, or when movement patterns concentrate load onto small areas of cartilage rather than distributing it evenly, the cartilage in those overloaded areas is subjected to compressive forces that exceed its capacity to recover between loading events. Over time, over thousands of steps and repetitions of the same misaligned movement, the cartilage in the overloaded zones thins, fragments, and ultimately fails, producing the pain and dysfunction of knee osteoarthritis. The 3 mistakes we are about to discuss are the 3 most common and most mechanically significant ways that adults over 50 inadvertently create this pattern of concentrated cartilage overloading in their daily movement without ever knowing that what they are doing every morning, every afternoon, every time they sit down and stand up, is progressively damaging the joints that their independence depends on. The first mistake is sitting for extended periods with the knees bent at or beyond 90 degrees and then rising from that position with the knees in front of the toes. Most adults over 50 spend a significant portion of their day sitting. In chairs, in cars, on sofas, at desks, in front of televisions. Sitting itself is not the problem. The problem is the combination of 2 things that happen together in most sitting situations: the knee bending to 90 degrees or beyond, and the mechanics of standing up from that position. Here is the biomechanics. When the knee is bent to 90 degrees, the patellofemoral joint, the articulation between the kneecap and the groove on the front of the femur, is loaded at approximately 3 times body weight in the patellofemoral contact zone. At 130 degrees of knee flexion, the depth many people sit at in a low sofa or car seat, the patellofemoral load approaches 7 to 8 times body weight. The cartilage under the kneecap, called the patellar cartilage, and the cartilage on the trochlear groove of the femur, the surfaces that make up the patellofemoral joint, are subjected to this concentrated compressive force for the entire duration of sitting in a deeply bent position. This would be manageable as an occasional position. The problem is duration and repetition. Adults who sit for 6 to 8 hours per day with deeply flexed knees are subjecting their patellofemoral cartilage to sustained high-intensity compressive loading for thousands of minutes per week. Research published in the journal Osteoarthritis and Cartilage found that prolonged sitting with knees bent beyond 90 degrees was significantly associated with increased patellofemoral cartilage, T2 relaxation time, a magnetic resonance imaging measure of cartilage water content, and collagen disruption that indicates early cartilage damage compared to sitting with knees at or below 90 degrees. The second component of this mistake is the rising mechanics. When most people stand up from a seated position, they lean the trunk forward, push through the feet and allow the knees to track forward past the toes as the body rises. This forward knee travel increases the moment arm of the patellofemoral joint load, concentrating compressive force on the anterior portion of the patellar cartilage and the trochlear groove. In adults over 50 whose patellofemoral cartilage is already showing early changes from years of accumulated load, this rising pattern is one of the most repetitively damaging movements in the daily activity repertoire. The correction is specific and teachable. First, adjust the seating position to maintain knee angles at or above 90 degrees whenever possible. Add a seat cushion or use a chair with a higher seat height that prevents the knees from bending deeply. When watching television, keep the legs extended on a footstool rather than bent under a coffee table. In car travel, adjust the seat position so that the knees are not deeply bent during long periods of driving. Second, modify the rising mechanics. Before standing, slide forward to the edge of the seat so that the feet are positioned under or slightly behind the knees. Keep the chest up and the trunk relatively upright as you push through the heels to stand. This shifts the loading emphasis from the patellofemoral joint to the hip extensors and reduces the forward knee travel that concentrates patellofemoral load. Practice this deliberately for 1 week, and you will find that your knees are significantly less sore after periods of sitting than they were before. The second mistake is walking or exercising with the feet turned outward, the externally rotated toed-out gait pattern that is extremely common in adults over 50, and that produces a specific pattern of medial knee joint overloading that is one of the strongest biomechanical predictors of medial compartment knee osteoarthritis progression. Many adults over 50 have developed an external foot rotation habit that began from hip flexibility limitations, hip external rotator tightness, or a natural tendency that was never corrected. It feels comfortable. It feels stable. It has been their normal walking pattern for so long that they do not notice it anymore. What it is doing to their knees is specific and measurable. When the foot is turned outward during walking, and the knee is loaded in single leg stance, which occurs with every step, the internal rotation of the tibia that the externally rotated foot produces places the medial compartment of the knee under concentrated valgus loading. The knee adduction moment, the rotational force that pushes the medial joint surfaces together, is significantly elevated in adults who walk with externally rotated feet compared to those with neutral foot alignment. Research published in the journal Gait and Posture found that a 10-degree increase in external foot rotation was associated with a 14 to 20% increase in the knee adduction moment, a clinically significant increase in medial compartment loading that, repeated hundreds of thousands of times over years of walking, produces the medial compartment cartilage loss that is the most common pattern of knee osteoarthritis in adults over 50. The correction begins with awareness, which requires either watching yourself walk in a reflection, having someone observe your gait from behind, or paying deliberate attention to the position of your feet during walking. The target is a foot position that is either neutral, toes pointing straight ahead, or mildly externally rotated at no more than 5 to 10 degrees. Achieving this correction requires addressing the hip external rotator tightness that drives the foot outward through regular stretching of the piriformis, the hip external rotators, and the iliotibial band, and through the conscious practice of neutral foot positioning during walking until the new pattern becomes automatic. Research published in the Journal of Biomechanics found that a 6-week gait retraining program that specifically targeted external foot rotation using real-time visual feedback about foot position during treadmill walking produced significant reductions in the knee adduction moment and significant improvements in knee pain in adults with medial compartment knee osteoarthritis. The knees responded to the corrected movement pattern within weeks of consistent practice. Before we continue with the third mistake, here is a pause for you. Do you know what your walking pattern looks like? Have you ever been told by a doctor, a physiotherapist, or someone who has observed you that you walk with your toes pointed outward? Drop a comment below right now and tell us. This particular mistake is one of the most common and most underrecognized contributors to knee damage over 50. And the simple act of becoming aware of your own gait pattern is the first step toward the correction that protects your joints. We read every comment. The third mistake is using the stairs, the curb, or any step with the leading knee tracking inward, the valgus collapse pattern that occurs when the knee caves toward the midline during single leg loading, and that is one of the most concentrated sources of medial and patellofemoral cartilage stress in everyday movement. The valgus collapse pattern occurs during any activity that requires single leg loading, stepping down from a curb, descending stairs, stepping off a bus, lowering into a chair, or any movement where one knee must bear the body's weight during flexion. In adults over 50, valgus collapse during these activities is extremely common and is driven by a combination of hip abductor weakness, quadriceps weakness, and the neuromuscular habits that have developed around knee pain avoidance. when the knee caves inward during a step down or stair descent. The medial compartment of the knee is compressed with a force that is substantially higher than it would be with correct alignment. Research published in the Journal of Orthopedic Research found that a valgus knee angle of just 10 degrees during step-down activities increased the medial compartment contact force by approximately 40% compared to a neutral knee alignment, a 40% increase in the loading of the cartilage, that is already the most commonly damaged tissue in knee osteoarthritis. The valgus collapse also concentrates load on the lateral patellofemoral joint, the outer edge of the kneecap contact zone, because the inward rotation of the femur that drives valgus collapse shifts the patellofemoral contact area laterally, creating the lateral patellar compression syndrome that many adults over 50 experience as pain on the outer edge of the kneecap during and after stair use. The correction requires two parallel interventions. The first is the hip abductor and quadriceps strengthening program we described in our previous video, specifically the clamshell, standing hip abduction, and wall slide, because the valgus collapse is driven by the inability of the hip abductors and quadriceps to control the alignment of the limb under load. You cannot correct a valgus collapse pattern through conscious effort alone in someone whose hip and knee muscles are too weak to maintain alignment under the loading forces of stair descent. The muscles must be strengthened first. The second intervention is conscious alignment practice on every stair and step descent. Before stepping down, consciously engage the glutes of the standing leg, a gentle squeeze of the gluteus medius, and align the knee over the second toe of the foot before transferring weight. The knee should track directly over the middle toes, neither caving inward nor pushing outward, throughout the entire range of the step-down motion. Practice this deliberately on every step every time. For at least 4 to 6 weeks, the period that neuromuscular research suggests is required to begin consolidating a new movement pattern into automatic execution. An assistive cue that many adults find helpful is placing a hand lightly on the outer thigh just above the knee before stepping down, not to push the knee outward forcibly, but as a proprioceptive reminder of the gluteus medius activation needed to maintain the knee in neutral alignment. Over weeks of practice, this physical cue can be gradually withdrawn as the new motor pattern becomes self-sustaining. The relationship between these 3 mistakes and the rate of knee osteoarthritis progression is not theoretical. Research published in the journal Arthritis Care and Research tracked the biomechanical loading patterns of adults with knee osteoarthritis over 4 years and found that those with the most adverse loading patterns, elevated knee adduction moments, high patellofemoral loads, and frequent valgus collapse events, showed significantly greater cartilage volume loss on MRI over the follow-up period than those with more favorable mechanics, independent of body weight, age, and baseline disease severity. This is the empowering flip side of that finding. Improving your movement mechanics, correcting the 3 mistakes we have described, actively slows the rate of deterioration, not eliminates it, because the structural changes already present in arthritic knees cannot be reversed, but slows it measurably in proportion to the consistency with which the corrections are practiced. Understanding why these 3 mistakes are so specifically damaging requires appreciating the concept of focal cartilage overloading, the way in which misaligned joint mechanics concentrate force onto small contact areas of cartilage rather than distributing it across the full articular surface. Healthy joint mechanics distribute loading forces across the maximum available cartilage surface area, reducing the contact stress per unit area to levels that the cartilage matrix can absorb and recover from between loading events. Misaligned joint mechanics, the deep sitting that concentrates patellofemoral load, the externally rotated gait that elevates the knee adduction moment, the valgus collapse that concentrates medial compartment and lateral patellofemoral force, all share this common mechanism. They reduce the effective contact area over which forces are distributed, increasing the stress per unit area above the cartilage recovery threshold. The chondrocytes, the cartilage maintenance cells we discussed in our arthritis prevention video, are particularly vulnerable to this focal overloading pattern. When chondrocytes are repeatedly subjected to compressive stresses that exceed the recovery capacity of the matrix they maintain, they shift from their normal anabolic building activity to catabolic degrading activity, producing the matrix metalloprokinases and inflammatory cytokines that accelerate cartilage breakdown. This chondrocyte stress response is the cellular mechanism through which the 3 mechanical mistakes we have described translate into the progressive cartilage loss of knee osteoarthritis, and it is the mechanism that the movement corrections we have described directly address by reducing the focal stress levels that trigger it. The integration of the movement corrections we have described with the nutritional strategies from our arthritis food series creates the most comprehensive approach to knee health over 50 at the research supports. The dietary anti-inflammatory interventions reduce the inflammatory environment in which cartilage damage occurs. The exercise program from our previous video builds the muscular protection that reduces joint loading. And the movement corrections we have described today address the third pillar, the daily biomechanical habits that either concentrate or distribute the unavoidable loading forces of daily life. No single pillar is sufficient alone. The person who eats perfectly, but sits in deeply bent knees all day, and walks with externally rotated feet, is undermining the anti-inflammatory work of their diet with the mechanical damage of their daily movement. The person who exercises faithfully but then climbs stairs with valgus collapse on every step is working against the strengthening gains of their exercise program with the concentrated loading of their movement pattern. The complete strategy is all three together. The footwear dimension of knee damage over 50 deserves specific mention as a fourth contributing factor that is closely related to the three mistakes we have described, and that, in many adults, is actively amplifying the knee adduction moment and valgus collapse patterns the mistakes create. Footwear with significant heel elevation, including the everyday dress shoes, heeled boots, and even the modestly heeled athletic shoes that most adults over 50 wear without thinking about their joint implications, increases the knee flexion angle during weight bearing, amplifies the knee adduction moment, and shifts the ground reaction force anteriorly in ways that increase patellofemoral loading with every step. Research published in the journal Arthritis Research and Therapy found that each centimeter of heel height increase was associated with a measurable increase in the knee adduction moment during walking, meaning that a heel of just 2-3 centimeters, worn daily for years, produces the same qualitative pattern of medial compartment overloading as the externally rotated gait pattern we discussed. The practical implication is that footwear selection after 50 is a joint health decision, not just a comfort or style preference. Minimal heel or zero drop footwear shoes in which the heel and toe are at the same height reduces knee adduction moments, reduces patellofemoral loads, and supports the neutral foot position we described in the correction for the second mistake. Athletic shoes specifically designed for cushioning and support, but with minimal heel drops such as those designed for trail running or natural movement disciplines provide the impact absorption at aging. Joints benefit from while avoiding the biomechanical compromises of elevated heel footwear. The insole dimension is equally relevant. Laterally wedged insoles that are thicker on the outer edge and thinner on the inner edge shift the foot slightly into inversion during standing and walking, reducing the ground reaction force vector that drives the knee adduction moment and producing measurable reductions in medial compartment loading. Multiple randomized controlled trials have documented that laterally wedged insoles reduce knee adduction moments and improve knee pain in adults with medial compartment knee osteoarthritis. They are available at orthopedic supply stores and online at low cost, and they can be combined with the neutral foot positioning correction we described to produce an additive reduction in medial compartment loading. The body weight dimension of knee damage over 50 deserves equally specific and equally practical acknowledgement, not as a judgment about body weight, but as a clear-eyed statement of the mechanical relationship between body weight and knee joint loading that adults making decisions about their knee health deserve to understand explicitly. The knee joint load during level walking is approximately 2.5 to 3 times body weight per step. This relationship is not linear in its effect on knee osteoarthritis risk. Research has documented that the relationship between body weight and knee osteoarthritis risk is disproportionately steep. A 5% reduction in body weight produces a greater than 10% reduction in knee joint loading force per step, and a 10 to 15% reduction in body weight produces a measurable reduction in knee pain and functional disability in adults with established knee osteoarthritis. The mechanical reason for this disproportionate benefit is that body weight reduction reduces not only the absolute force, but also the lever arm of the ground reaction force that drives both the knee adduction moment and the patellofemoral loading that the first two mistakes amplify. This means that the corrections we have described, seating mechanics, foot rotation, stair alignment, produce their greatest benefit in the context of a body weight that minimizes the baseline joint loading those mechanics operate on. The anti-inflammatory dietary strategies from our food series that support healthy weight management are therefore also, specifically and mechanically, knee joint protection strategies, reducing the amplitude of the forces that the movement corrections we are refining are trying to manage. The psychological and motivational dimension of making movement corrections deserves honest acknowledgement because the three mistakes we have described are not simply technical errors that anyone can correct by knowing about them. They are deeply habituated movement patterns, established over decades of daily practice, that have become automatic and invisible. Correcting them requires the same deliberate attention and consistent repetition that any skill learning requires, and it requires that attention to be maintained even when the corrections feel awkward, artificial, or effortful, which they inevitably will at the beginning. The research on motor learning, the science of how new movement patterns replace old ones, is consistent on one point above all others: the initial period of awkwardness and effort in executing a new movement pattern is not a sign that the correction is wrong. It is the neurological evidence that the new pattern has not yet been consolidated into the automatic circuits of the basal ganglia, where habitual movements are executed without conscious attention. Consolidation requires repetition, typically hundreds to thousands of repetitions of the corrected pattern before the new movement becomes as automatic and invisible as the old one. This is why the commitment we are asking for is not a one-time adjustment but a sustained practice, the consistent application of the 3 corrections on every step, every sitting event, and every stair descent for the months that neuromuscular learning requires. For adults over 50 whose knee health depends on the quality of their daily movement mechanics, this investment in movement reprogramming is one of the most high-return health behaviors available, its benefits compounding with every repetition across every remaining year of daily activity. The knees you protect through these corrections today are the knees that carry you to your grandchildren, that walk you through the travel you have been planning, that get you up from the chair in the morning with ease rather than with dread. Every correct repetition is a deposit into the joint health account that those future moments depend on. 3 mistakes, 3 corrections. Starting today, you now know what the 3 mistakes are. You know why they damage the knee joint at the level of cartilage mechanics. You know exactly what to do instead. The knowledge is yours. What happens to your knees from this point forward depends on what you do with it. If this video gave you a specific, practical, and evidence-based understanding of how you may be damaging your knees every day without knowing it, please support this channel. Hit the like button right now, subscribe if you have not already, and leave a comment below. Tell us which of the 3 mistakes you recognized in your own daily movement, and which correction you are going to start making today. We read every comment. Your engagement makes this community and this channel possible. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.